Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. Our host is integrative medicine Dr. Michael Finkelstein. Michael offers medical advice from a holistic paradigm, including both medical and metaphysical philosophies from the full spectrum of human experience. Slow Medicine Radio offers fresh ideas on how to attain a state of wellness that seems distant given the limitations of today's medical paradigm. It introduces you to thought leaders who connect the dots between theory and practice, examining health from a broad perspective with regards to medical diagnoses, conventional and alternative therapies, healthcare policy, and related topics that warrant further thought and discussion. Slow Medicine Radio does not prescribe to take this or do that. Instead, it offers an open-minded, intelligent, and practical approach to living, resulting in greater health individually and collectively. Here is Dr. Michael Finkelstein, the founder of Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York.
Welcome to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein, and we've been here every Monday at 5 o'clock, live, 1460 AM, WVOX and WVOX.com, to talk to you about your health, and your health from a perspective which is not simply take this or take that, as you heard, or not simply, get rigid about following advice and getting all tied up in that and neurotic, but about living your life, a verb, living, and trying to make the most of some good decisions so that you feel better and better, but not get scared, not react because of panic, which motivates a lot of people. I understand that, but to try to take this on almost with curiosity, almost with a sort of a enthusiasm, because you realize how some small changes, small shifts, and starting with a shift in perspective can really make a difference in terms of how you feel. Over the last couple of weeks, I've been speaking to callers about what we've been calling a 7-day challenge, which is this idea that in 7 days, you can take one practical step, such as cutting out processed foods or cutting out dairy or whatever, not completely overhauling your diet, but just taking one step about something that you know is important and seeing if in 7 days it makes a big difference. And our callers last week in particular shared their experiences with that. And I would think if you listen to the show, but if you trust me now to tell you that I got the sense that it really did make a profound difference, a surprisingly significant difference in how they felt in such a short period of time. One person cut out chocolate, the other cut out certain types of carbohydrates, started to sleep better, feel better, focus better. And that obviously is not the easiest thing to do. A lot of us have toyed with the idea of improving our diets, but that's not for everyone all the time. However, I don't know how often any of us have been consistent for a 7-day consecutive period of time to give it at least that much time to determine if it makes a difference. And that's where I want to start today, again, is to sort of introduce you to this concept, not necessarily entirely new, but one where can you do it for 7 days? Can you stick with it for 7 days? It might almost feel like you are holding your breath, and then reevaluate how easy or difficult that was and how much impact that might have. And again, I just want to urge you to take this on. The next phase of that, though, and I want to talk about this as well, is, very often after somebody does that, maybe all of you or many of you who are listening have done something like that before, and you realize, well, one, it's hard to maintain, and two, you might get the sense, and this may have something to do with why it's hard to maintain, that after you take one step, you need to take another. And the idea behind that then is you keep moving in that direction, and eventually, even before it happens, you're sort of overwhelmed by how much different it's going to be a couple of weeks or months from now. You sort of panic just saying, I can't give it all up. And I want to sort of encourage you to suspend that type of planning so far ahead, to get nervous about the future that far ahead, because that often defeats us. Maybe just stick with that one plan, not just for 7 days, but maybe for 7 months, conceivably for 7 years. One of the callers called in and said, I cut out processed foods, certain types of carbohydrates, and I'm sleeping better, I'm feeling better, I feel younger. That could be enough for now, until you really feel the energy and the balance and the stability, and maybe get motivated again to take another step. But what that caller last week also asked was, okay, so I did this much in my diet. Maybe what's the next dietary step? Should I cut out fruit? Should I cut out fat? Should I cut out whatever? And I made the suggestion that, and this gets into the concept of the slow medicine wheel of health, which has 7 spokes on it. One spoke is the physical body, but the other 6 spokes are really not about the body. One spoke is about the mind and our emotional state. Another spoke is about our relationships to nature. Another one about relationships to spirituality. Well, let's call it something divine, something beyond ourselves. Another is our relationships to community. There's the concept of our life's purpose. These are other spokes. And what I said to the man who called, who said, okay, so I'll take the next step in diet, right? Isn't that the logical plan? And I said, no, look around that wheel. Pick another spoke. Because as I said, I think sometimes when we think we're going to advance our diet, and this is the most common area people begin, I find, when they talk about improving their health, they get to that point where now I'm going to give up everything. It's eventually not pleasant to think about doing that. So even earlier on, since you know that's your trajectory, you may give up on it. So my suggestion is that after a little bit of a dietary shift, let's say something simple like cutting out processed grains, meaning things that are in flours, bread, pasta, cakes, cookies, or cut out artificial food altogether. So, or cut out candy, or cut out, 3 servings of an animal product a day, meaning 3 pieces of meat a day, so that maybe you just make it 1. So you do something, you take 1 step, but then after that, and you feel successful that you've achieved that, stay with it and go to something else. Express yourself in the form of art or something creative, or write letters or poetry. Consider going outside now. It's springtime, and taking care of your body in a different way, not with diet, but with maybe movement and sunlight. Or maybe reach out to people in your life, in your past, who you hold some, it's a difficult relationship, but maybe there's potential for it to heal if somebody initiates the reach out and says, look, we haven't spoken in a while. I'd like to revisit because we had such a good friendship or relationship, and I know it got off track, but is there a way to come back? And think about how healing that could be if you had a person in your life like that. So this is what I want to talk about today, and I want to give you a phone number so that you can call in, because I think it's your questions, it's your stories that are going to be most interesting, and that number is 914-636-0110. So that's 914-636-0110. And you can share with me your questions, your thoughts, even if you like, and often I invite the challenge. I invite people who are not sure what I'm saying makes sense to them, and love to hear why that feels that way to you, because it's in that debate often where we find common ground, where we find the practical solution to something. I think most people appreciate and understand, well, for the most part, I have to take better care of myself if I want to feel better. Even though I might also very much appreciate a good doctor, people who can really help me out. I would appreciate if I had a little bit more luck, like, things worked out in my life a little bit differently. I wasn't always pushing so hard for things to happen. Of course, we all would benefit from that type of support. But I think most of us, if we look at in the mirror and are honest with ourselves, know that there's probably some room for improvement just on the basis of how we take care of ourselves, such as what we put in our body or what we feed our mind, meaning what we watch on television and who we listen to and who we choose to call at 10 o'clock at night before we go to bed, what we read, what kind of music we listen to. I mean, these are all possibly inflammatory, especially if they're not harmonious and lovely. And I'm not saying don't listen to the news or stay current with events that are going on in the world, but there are certainly a certain portion of it that is enough, and many of us overconsume that type of aggravation. So we know that is a possibility for us. In fact, one of the fasts, if you will, like you can fast by not eating. Another type of fast is a news fast people talk about. They don't watch the news for a period of time. Imagine what that would feel like. I know there's so much going on in the world now that is interesting and may be relevant in terms of how important it is to our day-to-day lives here. Hard not to watch it. But imagine what that might feel like if you decided for the next 7 days, I'm not going to watch the news. I'm not going to go after it. I'm not going to listen to it on a radio. I'm not going to watch it on TV. I'm going to disengage from conversations that people are going to have with me about these subjects. I'm just going to try to suspend myself for a week and use that time for something else, like listening to good music or reading a book or taking a walk outside or playing with the dog, whatever it is that we might choose to do as an alternative. And then tell me a week from now how you feel with that. I would say that for most people, that would give them incredible relief, a lot more energy. Most people would sleep better. You might say, well, the consequence of that is I'll never be well informed again. Of course, we know that's not true. There's plenty of other ways that you can find out information. But again, I think the tendency for most of us is to overconsume that information, in which case it wears us out. So that's an option. This time of the year, as spring emerges, weather improves, the days get longer, it's more light. There's a great opportunity for us to spend a little bit more time outside. Not necessarily to do anything that might fall into the category of exercise, although there's nothing wrong with that. That's actually obviously generally good for us activity. However, for some people, it's just getting outside, which would be a big achievement. And for 7 days, for some people, that's enough. Go outside, sit on the closest bench to your house. Go to the closest green space. Tend some flowers in a pot on the patio. Whatever it might be, imagine if you did that for 7 days in a row. So the slow medicine wheel of health really offers an image. If you right now just sit with this image of a wheel and has 7 spokes of the 7 pillars, if you will, of this wheel. It holds it together. And just like your bicycle spoke or car wheel, it's got these spokes in it, and that creates strength in the wheel so that as it rolls, it continues to support the weight of whatever it's carrying. Well, that's the concept in slow medicine, is this wheel that has different elements to it. And so many people, I believe, overemphasize the physical body. Again, not saying that that's not important, but may spend almost all of their mental capital, their thoughts about how they're going to be healthier, and thinking about their body. I'm going to lose weight. I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to lower my cholesterol, my blood sugar. I'm going to lower my blood pressure. I'm going to look better, fit into my clothes, whatever, the story is. Of course, that makes sense. It's common. But what about what's on our mind? When you're closing your eyes as you're trying to go to sleep at night, what keeps you awake? What are the thoughts in your mind? Now, it might be my body doesn't feel so good, and I can't believe I ate so much for dinner. I mean, there could be those thoughts, but a lot of the thoughts that sort of keep us awake at night are the stress in our lives that have more to do with our relationships, our working, functional relationships, or our work, our jobs, whether or not we're well treated, whether or not we're well paid. These are the questions that arise that keep us awake at night, that actually contribute to the indigestion we might experience. So there's this mind space, which is pretty dominant. When we think about why we want to be healthy, we ask that question. We say, of course, most people given the choice would say, sure, I want to be healthy. But if you were to be asked, why do you want to be healthy? It's not just so that you don't have pain. Maybe you're going to say quickly, well, I want to live a long life. I get that. So why do you want to live a long life? What are you going to do with all those extra days and years? That's really the question. What are you going to do with this time, with this health? For most people, it's to do something fun, enjoyable, meaningful, to do it with other people, to have relationships, to be able to, see my grandchildren, play with them, to watch them graduate from high school. That means you're getting up there in years if you have a grandchild graduating from high school. And so most people say, yeah, that would be a nice achievement. It'd be a nice achievement to work in a community where I'm appreciated, and when I retire, that, all my friends and neighbors have something nice to say, and they, make me feel like I've done something for them, and I feel good about all that labor that I put into it. So many people work in, I would say, alternatively anonymous jobs where, they do very important work, maybe parts of the infrastructure of the city, but are not recognized as individuals. That's a hard job. So why do we want to be healthy? So maybe your job isn't going to lead you to have that experience, but maybe there's another role you play in your community where you can get that acknowledgement. So this is where life's purpose, I think, really becomes essential. This is why you want to be healthy, because you want to do something with this life you're blessed to have. So again, I want you to write down the number and call me if you have any thoughts on any of this. The number is 914-636-0110. And today I also wanted to talk about appreciation. That's a concept that I was thinking about in the last week, because whatever health we may have at the moment, it's potentially better than it could be. For most people, if you're alive listening, the alternative is not to be alive. So even if you're struggling with an ailment, in a lot of pain even, maybe the alternative for many of us could be worse. And so there's some value in that perspective. This is what I said at the beginning of the show near the introduction, which is that it's not just about what you do, although that's very important. But at the other side of the same coin is how you reflect and feel and your perspective on this life. And one of the important aspects of that is to appreciate what you do have. Of course, we can list, at length what we don't have. And for many of us, we do that pretty routinely, and it's part of our lives and part of what helps motivate us to achieve and to be ambitious and to try to strive for more, whether that's to allow our children to have a better life growing up than we may have had, or leaving something behind, or et cetera. So, part of what we don't have can be a source of motivation. But the other side of it is to take time regularly to appreciate what we do have, even if it's relatively limited. There's something energetic about spending time with that gratitude. For most of us, we realize that, that's a routine and sort of sanctioned at the time of the year, the Thanksgiving takes place. The holiday itself, Thanksgiving, is really that moment where we just sit down and at least go through the motions of considering the fact that we have this food, that we have this family, we have this place, or we have this community. We start being a little bit more conscious, at least in mind, on that day. But there's something really valuable energetically, meaning it fulfills you. It can actually make you feel better. There can be a psychological lift to just going through the motions of appreciation. And I want to leave you with that. I want you to think about those things that you do have, because often when we are feeling worn out, when we feel a little depressed about how not everything is working, and that's a reality for so many people, and so I have empathy. But part of what we can do to help ourselves is to just stop every once in a while and do list what we do have. So we might have friends and family. We might have the ability to even think about this subject, the wherewithal to sort of pull it together. We might have the wherewithal to read a book or to listen to a radio show that might talk about ideas that are not so difficult that you can actually practically pull off. You could wake up in the morning and see the sunrise or the sunshine. And in the next couple of weeks, hopefully, we'll all be seeing some flowers. These are all, things that uplift us. Even if it's just short term, there's still that ability to do that. I was thinking, last week when the first day of spring, how we appreciate spring a lot because it follows the winter. And if you think about life with that same contrast, there's the cold, dark period, and then there's a warm, light period. And the question is, would we appreciate the warmth and the light as much if we didn't have the cold and the dark? And this is that concept. Would we appreciate the health, the ability to move freely, without pain, as an example, if there weren't periods of our life where we were somewhat restricted? So that's the concept of appreciation. I want you to sit with that for a while, meaning a minute, because we're going to take a break, and reflect on what you may have gratitude for yourself. If you'd like, you can share that with us, 914-636-0110. I also want to tell you right before the break about some upcoming programs at Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York, where we have coming up this Wednesday night a new moon ceremony today is actually the new moon. So, at the time of the new moon, within a day or two, we usually gather and we start talking about what's going on in the heavenly bodies. And we have this friend, Dimitra Vassiliadis, who's the slow medicine astrologist, who comes to Sunraven and talks to us about, well, what's going on. And there's some interesting planetary things that are going on right now, in addition to the equinox that just passed. So that's one thing that's coming up. We also have the beginning of our seasonal garden co-op, which is a community-sponsored agricultural project where people do some work in the garden, but they take home for 6 months or so these amazing vegetables that are grown at Sunraven, and they get to participate in the whole process with other people in the community. We have the open house for that on April 22nd, which is actually Earth Day. So that will be a Saturday in about a month. And then we have Peter Harris, who has been here on the show talking to me about abundance. So since April is the time where a lot of us think about money because of our tax situation, he's going to tell us how we see past money into the concept of abundance and how we maybe, through appreciation, this whole same concept, we could actually feel better with the same resource, meaning even with the dollars don't change, we can actually feel better relative to how much we have. That's the state of abundance that we're going to talk about. And that's part of what slow medicine is about, really, is cultivating a sense of wellness without necessarily more things. It's really with this appreciation. So anyway, I'm going to take a break. The number is 914-636-0110. When we come back, we'll continue this conversation on Slow Medicine Radio. Stay with us.
You're listening to Slow Medicine Radio. You can find out more about the show and the work of Dr. Michael Finkelstein by visiting his website, slowmedicinedoctor.com. Slow Medicine Radio is sponsored by the Slow Medicine Foundation, dedicated to providing community-centered, experiential, and reflective learning for individuals, families, and groups, offering educational programs, events, and resources, as well as insightful health evaluations with customized medical guidance. Dr. Finkelstein works with his wife, Robin Queen Finkelstein, at their farm, Sunraven, in Bedford, New York. And they invite you to visit and take advantage of this unique resource, including men's and women's groups and couples programs. If you think about it, much of what we experience when we don't feel well is a result of the fast world and how it affects us. Therefore, if fast is the disease, then slow is the medicine. Visit Sunraven, the home of slow medicine in Bedford, New York. Go to slowmedicinedoctor.com or call 914-218-3113. And thank you for tuning in Mondays at 5 p.m. right here on 1460 WVOX.
Welcome back to Slow Medicine Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Michael Finkelstein. And we've been talking about the slow medicine wheel of health, about those 7 spokes, the body, the mind, nature, community, the divine, life's purpose. And I wanted to get back to the comments about appreciation, the idea that when we can practice and feel gratitude for those things that we have, it tends to fulfill itself. It tends to help us feel more full. I think we understand this from the opposite, which is when we tend to feel down and we keep repeating how down we feel and how gloomy things are. I think we get more depressed. So if we're sitting there and it's raining and it's dark and we say, gee, it's raining and it's dark and it's raining and it's dark, and our friends come into the house and it's raining and it's dark, and eventually it feels pretty gloomy. On the other hand, if somebody came in and brought balloons and some champagne, and it might be raining and dark outside, but it say, come on, it's time to really celebrate life. It's time to pick ourselves up. It's time to enjoy our friendship. The weather outside did not change, but the weather inside does, and that's largely affected by what we tend to focus on. Now, when we say that, we're not just fooling our minds. The cells of our body respond to our thoughts. So, as an example, if you were sitting here with me and I embarrassed you, I say, hey, you're really beautiful, or you're really smart, or you're really successful, or you're really a great person to talk to, you have a great, manner, you would blush, right? You would blush here in front of me. Your face would turn red. Well, how does your face turn red? I didn't throw red paint at you. So, but what I did was I said something to you that you heard. What you heard, was registered quickly, and it led to a feeling state. That feeling state changed how your blood flowed to your face. That's it. So the energy of a comment, the energy of a look, sometimes a glance, the presence of a flower, or the awareness of beautiful music, could change not only how what you think about, how you feel, but can change then how your body functions, because cells of your body now start behaving differently metabolically. That leads to them in collection, as a group, as an organ, to now change, reconfigure your physical body. So the power of the mind is, for most people, happens without your thought, but is untapped, largely untapped. So if you can register this and consider how important it is and how simple it would be to just sit in the middle of things that are beautiful, listen to great music, look at great art, choose wisely as far as what television program you're watching, meaning one that might be uplifting, like, watching puppies play or something. And that flurry of those good feelings, those waves of excitement and joy and fulfillment actually improve your health. Because if you string those moments together, you will actually start shifting. It's like exercise. You get your body into a different type of shape. Keep doing it. Running once will lead you to have a Charlie horse, won't really get you into better shape. But if you kept with it for 7 consecutive days, as I'm talking to you now, that's the advice, 7 days of this, 7 days of no TV, or at least no news, 7 days of getting outside and, in the sun every day, even on a cloudy day, 7 days of looking at flowers, 7 days of, petting animals, 7 days where each day you write a letter to an old friend. 7 consecutive days starts getting you into different shape. Now, let's say you have high blood pressure. Let's say you have stomach issues. Let's say you have cancer. Well, your body's going to respond. You will be healthier 7 days from now than you are today following any of this. Now, imagine if you joined in with a bunch of others of these spokes on the medicine wheel. What if, in addition to that activity, you also did empower yourself to eat a little different, literally feed your body differently? What if you did try to find time to move more regularly? And you then looked at how these things work synergistically. You can turn around something that has been sort of maybe, spiraling downhill pretty dramatically. And this is why I think this whole point, this is what excited me about going back to school after, 15 or 20 years of practicing internal medicine, what I learned in medical school, which was fine. It works well to bail people out of emergency situations, but it didn't really prepare me to give people advice so that they would prevent illness, or when they had illness so that they can manage it on their own, or at least in part on their own, and whatever else they needed from doctors would work that much better. What I find sometimes is also true is that sometimes this works so well that you need less to zero from doctors. And for most people I speak to, that would be a really nice thing to achieve. But it doesn't happen by itself. It requires a certain amount of attention, but in my mind, the idea is to give people enough of a blueprint to how to do this so that it's not random, it's not disorganized in a way that leads people to sometimes feel like they're doing so much work in this one space and they're still not feeling too much better. And that's where I started this conversation. Sometimes people emphasize one area to the exclusion of others, and they won't get that much mileage. I mean, even if you got so athletically inclined, you took this advice for 7 days, and not only did you run a mile, but you kept running. And by next fall, you were able to run the New York City Marathon. Well, you're in great shape physically, but maybe if you've pulled yourself out of all your social engagements because you were working so hard to get your body in shape to run, you no longer had any friends. Your coworkers found you boring because all you talked about was running. You had no other interests in the world because running was your exclusive preoccupation. Well, that's not a healthy person, even though their body might be pretty good. So health is really determined by the interrelationship between these 7 different areas. And that's how I came up with them. I didn't just, come up with 7 random ideas. It was in my practice and in my studies that I realized that, no, there were 7 core principles of a healthy person that really were essential for a person to be truly whole healthy. What's interesting about that as well is this is not a recipe for immortality. I want to be clear. I think probably you understand this. I'm not talking about living forever. That's not really feasible. There's no, I think, authentic medical practitioner who would really offer advice as if somehow it was going to be a permanent solution to the subject of mortality. Without being silly about that, this is really about living well. This is about quality of life. And if I can help somebody achieve a quality of life today that is far beyond what they might have experienced recently or what they have expected, and they can string together weeks, months, years of this, that's my job. That's me feeling fulfilled, at least when I do. And what's very important to say is that people tend to live longer. They tend to achieve a little bit more longevity when their mind and their body are in this type of synergistic situation where they're using their mind intelligently to, promote the healthy cell, the cell that blushes when they're complimented, the cell that feels good when you listen to amazing music, the cell that feels relaxed when your mind is at ease because it hasn't been filled with, nightmarish scenarios that occur in the world day to day because you've chosen not to pay so much attention to them. This is the body, mind, spirit, essentially, of somebody who's going to do very well for a longer period of time. What's interesting, too, is that when you are in that type of balance shape, you're likely to be able to tolerate some of the hard things that do happen and cross our path. You're less likely to be thrown. You're less likely to lose sleep if, most days you sleep really well because most days you don't really pay attention to some of the horrific events that are going on around us. And I'm not saying pull yourself so far out of our community and our world that you don't participate in its healing and in the solutions that are so desperately needed, but that you don't have to lose yourself in that battle and basically get drowned in the negativity. So there's that balance point, and of course each of us choose that. So give you the number again, because I'd love to hear your thoughts and any of your stories. The number is 914-636-0110. One other event that I will be going to, where I'll be working, is at Gilda's Club. That's on April 13th, which is a Thursday night, so 2.5 weeks from now. And Gilda's Club, as you know, which is in White Plains, is a center which offers support and programming for people with cancer and their families. It's obviously a very important subject because so many people have this experience in their lives. And I often share with people in that audience, one of the problems that I see, which I talked about here on the show a couple of weeks ago, which was this concept of medical hexing. The idea that, we could have an illness that we know about, we can feel it in our body. But when somebody we trust, like a physician, tells us we have this disease, and the word of the disease, especially the word cancer, shakes us because it's associated with in our minds as something, that can kill us. So it's really serious. When not only is our body affected, but at that point, our mind is affected. We are aware we can't ignore it anymore, that this is going on. And for people who understand this in a way, whether it's really accurate or not, whether they see it as a death sentence or not, that's going on in their mind at the same time whatever the true disease is in their body is taking place. So now there's this combination of these two forces that are synergistic in not a very positive way. So when I talk to people with cancer, I often say, look, obviously cancer is in your body, but how do you get cancer out of your mind? How do you live with a condition like that? How do you live with mortality? That's wouldn't say a disease, but that's a condition we all face. The clock is ticking. The end is closer than it used to be. And I don't, again, say that to be depressing, but this is a reality. So how do we deal with that? For many people, of course, they ignore it completely. They sort of just don't attend to it. They don't think about it. Most 20, 30-year-olds are not thinking about the end of life, whereas many 80 and 90-year-olds might be more regularly dealing with that because friends and siblings are experiencing the end of life, and so it's more timely for them. So, but a young person isn't dwelling on this for more often than not, and so you can have a disease, though, and even though it's landed on you and it really is part of your life, you can pay more or less attention to it depending on how you want to exercise control over your thoughts. And as I was saying earlier, the more your thoughts fall into the positive, soothing, harmonious category, the more your body is going to experience that. And if you're looking and asking the question, especially if you have an ailment like that, how do I do better than expected? How do I really beat the odds? Part of what is important to understand is that your mind has so much influence on that. And so what are the things to do? Well, look at this slow medicine wheel of health, those 7 spokes. Think about 7 days of something. So 7-day challenge to make a decision about inflammation in your body as far as it relates to food. We've talked about that. 7 days going outside and moving your body in nature. 7 days of paying attention to this, to the spiritual, the question about life, the big picture, whether that's a religious process for you or whether it's just an interest, a fascination. Just read what other people have to say about it, not necessarily to judge it or evaluate it or decide you agree or don't agree, but just spend some time contemplating this big mystery. And enjoying, in a sense, the idea, especially when it comes to the mystery, that maybe there isn't an obvious answer. And it's just one of the more interesting aspects of being so intelligent, so conscious. Maybe there's a way you can look at your relationship to other people you're living with, your family of origin, your children. Maybe you can look at it as far as how you fit into your community. What are your contributions to this community? If you were to be gone tomorrow, would they miss you? Are you a pillar of your own society? Not to overemphasize that where you have to do something like that, but are you feeling like you're part of a whole and that you're carrying your weight? For most people, I believe it's a nice feeling to feel that way, that you are part of a big picture, that you're doing something to support other people in their process. And then this question of life's purpose comes up, which is, are you clear on why you're working so hard? Not just working so hard for money and to support your family on the most practical level, but why are you dealing with any of this stuff? What's the meaning of your life, the value of your life? It goes beyond feeding your family, but that reflects the uniqueness that you and each of us have. Each of us is born with certain gifts. You know this because if you've had children or been around children, you know that 2 children, even siblings, even identical twins, have very different natures. That some like, animals, some like flowers, some like music, some like throwing balls. And so, our individuality is so important. And as we age, often, part of the structure of our culture is conformity, which I think is not really healthy in this regard because it doesn't really emphasize the unique talent and quality of each person, giving them, as they grow, a sense of fulfillment and contribute to the development of their self-esteem. So many middle-aged children, even, and certainly adults, grow up with doubt about their worth. Can lead secondarily to self-destructive behavior and sort of other types of acting out phenomena. But the idea is, whether that's been your story or not, listening to this now, you could reevaluate. Now, what's unique about me? What is, why am I here? And it could be really interesting. It doesn't have to be anything conventional. Doesn't have to be anything that conforms to expectations from society or even your family. Just be the thing that you're most interested in, that you knew if you were left, if money didn't matter, if there was no obstacle in your way, that's what you'd be doing with your time. And think about that. That gift, in all likelihood, other people would find very interesting, find enjoyable to be around. Perhaps it's creating music or art. Perhaps it's building things. Perhaps it's organizing things. Perhaps it's being a parent, raising young children. Or perhaps it's serving the animals or the plants in the world. That this is your devotion. And if you did that, of course, the people around you would really appreciate it. It may not be what you can make a living doing. That's secondary for this exercise. But if we can imagine ourselves what our gifts are, then we could maybe re-identify with our purpose. Maybe even though we can't change our jobs, maybe though we can't move, though we can't leave our families, we can't do a lot of things perhaps, we can start thinking creatively about how we can sort of weave that back into some practical living state for ourselves. Because I think for many people, we really do benefit from having something that's that easy for us, that's interesting, that doesn't feel like work, doesn't feel like it's like when you're doing it, you lose track of time, that type of thing. As for some of us, we can't remember what that is. We may not be able to put our finger on it. So I have two suggestions for you to sort of come into more clarity on that subject. One is think about, what do you do when you lose track of time? What do you do when you're out and about in the world where time, like hours, goes by, you haven't looked at a watch or a clock, and you haven't really even wondered about it? You don't feel like you need to do anything else, like eat. You don't feel hungry. You don't feel tired. You have all this energy. What are you doing when that happens? So that's one thing to consider. Give you a sense when I garden, when I'm out in my backyard with my hands in the dirt and planting seeds or clearing rocks or weeding even. I can do that for hours and I won't even feel thirsty in the middle of a hot summer day. I can be in a river fishing, and that's something where I could probably spend all day. If the sun didn't set, I wouldn't know what time it was. So those are the types of things, as an example, that people do. It has nothing to do, neither of those necessarily have to do with occupation. It just has to do with something that you just know you love to do. The other is, and this sometimes is a more interesting way to ascertain this, you need the help of others, but you can speak to people who knew you when you were little like 3, 4, or 5 years old. So that could be a sibling, could be your parents, but neither your siblings or parents necessarily are that objective. So you might ask somebody like an uncle or an aunt or, a neighbor, and ask them this question and say, like, when I was little, I can't remember, of course, but when I was little, when you looked at me, when you watched me run around, play around, be free like a child, what did you think I was going to wind up doing in my life? What was I about? What was my nature? What was your hunch as far as, what was special about me? And sometimes other people can give you some interesting answers on that subject that you may have forgotten about because it was so long ago and so covered up often by the conventional rules, like even going to kindergarten, sitting in a chair. For many 5-year-olds, that's really not a natural movement, that type of confinement. Now, we know some people do okay in school, some people don't. It's not always a case of who's intelligent. So this is, our intelligence is something that goes beyond just how we've done on tests when we're in school. So sometimes you have to go to a point in time before you were lined up, before you were, compared to others. And to get a sense of who you were. And our own memories of time when we were 3, 4, 5 is usually very spotty. So we're not likely to be able to necessarily just jump back to that image of ourselves. So sometimes getting the help of other people are really critical. So that's one of the things that I would ask you to do, since life's purpose is such an important part of this slow medicine wheel of health and what could help you achieve this next state of life. So to recap a little bit, we started off with the discussion about how over the last couple of weeks I've been giving people this idea that in 7 days they could make some major shifts in how they feel. And the people that we've been speaking to on air here have talked about their diets, because I did emphasize that as far as the anti-inflammatory potential that an anti-inflammatory diet would have. And so people made some very good, very intelligent adjustments, like cutting out refined processed foods or chocolate. So those make a lot of sense. But then the idea was to take another step, if that was your first, and pick a different category. So get off the food subject at that point and do something different that would have similar value, but was in an altogether different field, so that you didn't saturate that one area with so much attention, and that, preventing burnout, if you will, or the anxiety of projecting where this leads to and realizing, well, eventually I'll only be eating anything. A lot of people, I'm not saying that to be funny. A lot of people think about these diets that are recommended as eventually I'll wind up eating nothing I like. It'll be all, lettuce, and that's, who wants to live that way? So I would say at some point, logically, you stop advancing your diet so that you don't have that feeling of rebellion, rejection. It's not a good plan not to eat anything but lettuce. That's not necessarily what I'm advising, I advise, but this is sometimes how people's minds work. So to help you with that, then I suggested you pick another one of the 6 spokes of the 7-spoked wheel of health and work there for a little while. And then after that, talked about how appreciation is this other factor, which is every once in a while pause, take an inventory, consider, what's actually working, even though we know you could list a lot of things that aren't working. Consider what is working, and then spend some time appreciating that, because that appreciation is that positive flush of the cells of your body that will lead you to a state of greater harmony and will empower you, because the opposite is draining. So the typical habits we have of not regularly looking at ourselves and saying, at least I have that. So the negativity of the habit of what we don't have can actually drain us further. And I'm not trying to tell people to ignore the things that aren't working, because those are maybe challenges, maybe they're real problems that have to be attended to, but in their time. Not all the time is the point. So that's what I want to say. We have a few minutes left in the show. If you want to call up, happy to talk to you. It's 914-636-0110. So one of the other things I want to share as far as appreciation is concerned is my appreciation for WVOX. For the last 10 months or so, I've had this opportunity to sit and talk with you about my philosophy of living and my work at Sunraven and with Slow Medicine. And it's really been an enjoyable period. This is springtime for us at Sunraven. And in the spring, we go back to the garden to really focus a lot of our attention on our garden project. And I'm going to be spending more time there. And so for the next period of time, I'm going to take a hiatus from the show here on WVOX. But don't want to leave it there. I want to leave it with an open invitation for you to stay connected and to share with me your thoughts, your questions, and ideas for the show when it picks up. And ideas even for people who might want to sort of work with me on the show in the form of sponsorships. I know there are a lot of businesses out there, a lot of people out there in the healing space who would really appreciate having some of their work aired. And I'm always looking for people like that to share in this, because some of what I do is to work cooperatively in the community with other people to try to build upon what already exists and to make more of this available. And so the Slow Medicine Foundation specifically is an organization, a not-for-profit organization that we have created specifically to raise funds and to raise funds for community projects, such as what we do here to make this radio show practical. So this will be the last show for a while. I'm not sure how long, but we're going to hopefully pick it up again with your support. And so you can write to me at michael@slowmedicinedoctor.com. And all those words are spelled out, Slow Medicine Doctor, DOCTOR, michael@slowmedicinedoctor.com. The website is slowmedicinedoctor.com. And our work at Sunraven in Bedford is open. As I said, we're going to have a garden program that will begin. Actually, our open house, our first day really is April 22nd, which is Earth Day. But we're already breaking ground after the snow has melted. We've got our seeds started in our greenhouse, and we're getting that all ready. So that's a lot of activity. I'll be at Gilda's Club on April 13th, as I mentioned. Tonight, before that, is our new moon ceremony, and we're going to have another one at the end of April. Keep an eye out for that on our website. And then we have the Slow Medicine Abundist following Tax Day later in the month of April as well. I want to specifically thank Don Stevens, who's been the producer of the show, for all of his expertise, support, friendship, kindness in every respect. And Judy Fremont, who has opened the invitation for me to work here, and Bill O'Shaughnessy, of course, who's been owning and operating this station for quite a long time, and I'm indebted to have had the opportunity to work with all of them. My friend John Iannuzzi has been my personal producer, you might say, to allow this show to even have a platform to begin with. We've been working together for years, even before finding WVOX, and that's been a real opportunity for me. So in the concept of appreciation, I've not forgotten for one day, 1 minute during this entire last year about how all those people have really come together to make this possible. And of course, for all of you, so that the reason I do this, the reason I work this way is because when I was 4, I was told, when I asked my neighbors, what did you think I was going to be when I grew up? And they said in various words, in various languages, that I would somehow help others by teaching. And that's very interesting because, the word doctor in Latin means teacher. My mother actually thought I'd be a rabbi, and the word rabbi in Hebrew means teacher. And so this is what my 4-year-old self, obviously, at least from a couple of people, sort of had to say. And I did find myself pretty quickly, not just to medicine, which, the way conventional medicine is practiced, you wouldn't say most doctors are teachers. To me, unfortunately, they've, sort of been molded into mechanics to some extent, which is disheartening, I think, for a lot of my colleagues in particular, because they want to be closer. They want to be more effective. There's nothing wrong with a mechanic, by the way. A skilled surgeon is maybe one of the most important persons we can have around us. But that's different than somebody who's going to share with you their ideas, their experience, perhaps not just knowledge, but maybe a little bit of wisdom and common sense to help you make good choices in your life. So that, you don't have to wait to make the good choice of which doctor, which hospital, that there's actually other things that you have control over and power over beforehand. And so, I was clearly driven through medicine to learn this science, so perhaps build a certain amount of credibility and to understand how our bodies work, but to then have learned that our body is so affected by our mind that if I could help people with what's on their mind, feeling empowered, part of what's on your mind is not just, let's say, dealing with like difficult thoughts, emotions, but to work with your thoughts to make good decisions, to recognize with your mind that sunlight is useful, to recognize with your mind that moving your body out in sunlight is useful, recognize with your mind that understanding when the sun was at its zenith through the course of the year and when it was at its equinox and when it was at its nadir, these were all relevant somehow to the rhythm of the human being, like it is all nature. And to understand in our mind that how we feel about ourselves, our life's purpose, has a lot to do with how our body's going to function. And so I went through medical school understanding a lot about how the body functions, only to be left with the idea that actually there's more power in the mind than there is in just focusing on the body. So that's what I want to leave you with. I want to leave you with there are ways to do it, starting with a perspective, with an awareness of how much you possess already that can make a difference, that perhaps in 7 days, 7 weeks, 7 months, you can make such profound changes that next time I'm on air, you're going to call me and you're going to say, that was pretty incredible. I did it just because of what you suggested that I can do with my mind. And that's what I'm going to leave you with. That's what I want to hear from you when we return. You can write to me along the way, Michael at slowmedicinedoctor.com. And I wish you peace until we speak again.